The rain wasn't heavy that morning, just enough to blur the windshield of the silver-gray pickup truck idling in the lot of Sunrise Diner No. 28. It fell in a soft, persistent drizzle, cloaking the small town in a veil of mist as if it were trying to hide something from the world. Inside the diner, amber lights glowed through the fogged-up windows, casting a warm, deceptive invitation. To most, it was just another roadside stop, a place for truckers, locals, and weary travelers to grab a quick coffee and a slice of toast. But to James Carter, the scene was a puzzle. Each detail a potential clue to a truth buried beneath polished reports and steady revenue streams. James, 54, CEO and founder of Sunrise Restaurant Group, sat motionless behind the wheel, his fingers tightening around a cardboard box of convenience store toast he'd picked up to blend in. The name tag clipped to his warm flannel jacket read Tom Bennett, retired trucker, a disguise carefully chosen to make him invisible in a place where no one looked twice at a stranger. His dark cap sat low, shadowing a face lined with years of boardroom battles and late-night dreams of a company built on fairness. He wasn't here for breakfast. He was here to uncover what the spreadsheets couldn't show, what the HR reports had glossed over with their sterile numbers. Sunrise Diner No. 28 was a paradox. Its revenue was solid, surpassing quarterly goals by 8%, a figure that had earned it a glowing mention in the last board meeting. But the turnover rate, 40% in 6 months, was a red flag, a silent scream that something was rotting beneath the surface. The employee engagement score, a metric James had insisted on tracking since the company's early days, ranked dead last across all 62 locations. He'd once told his regional managers during a training session a decade ago, if you want to know if a restaurant's healthy, don't ask the manager. Watch how the staff pours coffee at 7 a.m. Today, he was here to test that wisdom himself. James exhaled, his breath fogging the truck's window for a moment before he pushed the door open. The chilly drizzle stung his face as he stepped out, adopting the slightly uneven stride of a man who'd spent decades on the road. The diner's neon sign flickered faintly, its letters spelling out sunrise in a cursive glow that felt more nostalgic than vibrant. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee, buttered toast, and the faint tang of cleaning solution. The soft clink of spoons against ceramic mugs mingled with the low hum of early morning chatter. Regulars sat at their usual spots, an old man in a plaid shirt nursing a black coffee at the counter, a young couple sharing a plate of pancakes in a booth, their laughter cutting through the din. James chose a corner table tucked away near the back where he could see the entire floor without drawing attention. The vinyl seat creaked under his weight, and he set the toast box down, its crinkle barely audible over the chime of the doorbell as another customer entered. His eyes scanned the room, taking in the staff. 3 servers moved through the space, their motions mechanical, like actors in a play they'd performed too many times. One wiped tables with a rag that looked more decorative than functional. Another, a young man with neatly gelled hair, lingered near the point-of-sale system, tapping the screen with an air of ownership. But it was the 3rd server who caught Jane's attention. Her name tag read Emma Thompson. She moved with a hurried but careful grace, balancing a tray of steaming coffee and toast as if it were an extension of her body. Her hair was tied back in a messy bun, strands slipping loose, and her uniform sleeves were slightly frayed at the cuffs. Her smile was polite but strained, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was working, truly working, while the others seemed merely present. James watched as she darted between tables, refilling mugs, clearing plates, and scribbling orders with a pencil that looked like it had been sharpened one too many times. He raised a hand, catching her eye. "Coffee, black. And a slice of toast, please," he said, his voice gruff, matching the persona of Tom Bennett. Emma nodded, jotting the order before hurrying to the next table. When she returned, she set the cup and plate down so gently it was as if she feared scratching the table's worn surface. "Here you go, sir," she said, her voice soft but clear. "Butter and jam on the side, just in case." James nodded, offering a small smile. "Pretty busy this morning, huh? Morning tips must be decent, right?" The question was casual, tossed out like small talk, but his eyes sharpened. Watching her reaction, Emma froze for a split second, a flicker so brief no one else would have noticed. But James, who'd spent a lifetime reading body language the way others read balance sheets, saw it. Her smile faltered, missing her eyes entirely, and her voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible over the hiss of the espresso machine in the corner. "Morning shifts are the worst for tips, especially when we split them, but only a few actually get anything." The words landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading through James's mind. He lifted his coffee cup, only to set it back down, its warmth suddenly tasteless. Low tips were no surprise in the industry, but only a few actually get anything. That wasn't just a complaint. It was a crack in the foundation of a system he built to be fair. Sunrise's tip-sharing model was designed to reward effort, not favoritism. Had something twisted it into a tool for exclusion? He glanced at the counter where Michael Harris, the branch manager, stood chatting with a regular. Michael's dark blue shirt was neatly pressed, a pen tucked in his pocket, his smile perfectly time-polished. Professional, the kind that kept upper management at ease. Nearby, Ethan Harris, Michael's nephew, leaned against the PI system, his fingers dancing across the screen with a confidence that felt out of place for a part-time server. James's gaze lingered, his mind turning over Emma's words. A system designed to be transparent shouldn't have shadows, but he could feel them creeping in. The coffee cup sat untouched, its steam curling into the air like a question mark. James's thoughts drifted to the early days of Sunrise, when he and his father, a diner cook with calloused hands and unshakable principles, had sketched out their vision on a napkin, a place where every worker was seen, every effort rewarded. That was 20 years ago, when James was still a scrappy entrepreneur with a single diner and a dream. Now, with 62 locations, had he lost sight of that promise? Emma moved to another table, her tray tilting slightly as she balanced a fresh pot of coffee and a stack of plates. James watched her, noting the way she anticipated orders before customers spoke, the way she smiled even when a rude patron snapped about cold eggs. She was the heartbeat of this place, yet her words suggested she was invisible to the system. Invisible to his system. A chill ran through him, sharper than the drizzle outside. He pulled his cap lower, sinking into the role of Tom Bennett, but his mind was racing as James Carter, the man who built Sunrise on the premise of fairness. Something was wrong here, something that didn't show up in revenue charts or performance reviews. It was buried in the way Emma's shoulders sagged when she thought no one was looking, in the way Ethan's fingers lingered on the pause screen, in the way Michael's smile felt like a mask. James took a sip of the coffee, its bitterness mirroring the unease settling in his chest. The diner's amber glow felt less like warmth, now and more like a facade, hiding a truth he needed to uncover. He didn't know yet what he'd find, but Emma's words had lit a spark, and he wasn't leaving until he saw the fire. As the doorbell chime began, signaling another customer, James leaned back, his eyes fixed on the floor. This wasn't just a diner anymore. It was a battlefield, and he was stepping into it unarmed, disguised, and determined to find the truth. The drizzle had stopped by the time James Carter, still cloaked in the guise of Tom Bennett, returned to Sunrise Diner No. 28 the next morning. The mist lingered, softening the edges of the neon sign, but the air felt heavier now, charged with the weight of Emma Thompson's words from the day before. Only a few actually get anything. Those words had haunted James through a sleepless night in his hotel room, replaying like a broken record alongside the memory of her weary smile. He built Sunrise on the promise that every worker's effort would be seen. Yet here was a woman pouring coffee with the precision of an artist, only to be erased from the rewards she earned. Today, he wasn't just observing. He was digging. James settled into the same corner table, the vinyl seat creaking under him like an old friend. The diner was busier now, the clatter of plates and the murmur of conversation filling the space. Regulars dotted the counter, the old man in plaid sipping his coffee, a trucker in a baseball cap hunched over a newspaper. The amber lights still glowed, but to James, they seemed less warm, more like a stage spotlight hiding shadows in the wings. He ordered coffee and toast again, keeping his cap low, his eyes sharp. His fingers traced the edge of the convenience store toast box he brought as a prop, but his attention was fixed on the floor. Emma was there, moving like a conductor in a silent orchestra. She weaved between tables, refilling mugs before customers asked, clearing plates with a quiet efficiency that made her nearly invisible to the chaos around her. Her uniform was the same frayed sleeves, name tags slightly askew, but today, James noticed a small notebook tucked into her apron pocket, its edges curled from use. It was the kind of thing you'd miss unless you were looking for it, and James was looking at the counter. Ethan Harris, Michael's nephew, stood by the POS system, his gelled hair catching the light as he tapped the screen with a proprietary air. Another server, Jason, a lanky young man with a forced smile, lingered nearby, occasionally wiping the counter, but spending more time chatting with Ethan. James counted the tables. Emma was handling 12, darting from one to another, while Ethan and Jason split 4 between them, their movements leisurely, almost performative. Yet every digital tip transaction seemed to flow through Ethan's hands, his fingers dancing across the POS with a speed that suggested more than routine. James sipped his coffee, its bitterness mirroring the suspicion brewing in his chest. Tip-sharing system at Sunrise was supposed to be transparent. Tips pooled, divided by hours worked, distributed equally. But Emma's words suggested a fracture, a deliberate skewing of the rules. He needed to know more. When Emma approached to refill his mug, he leaned forward, keeping his voice low, casual. "You're running the show out there," he said, nodding toward the floor. "Must be tough keeping up with all those tables. Do you get to handle the tips yourself, or is it all through that machine?" He gestured toward the pause. Emma's hand paused mid-pour, a tremor so slight it barely rippled the coffee. Her eyes flicked to the counter, where Michael Harris stood, his back to them, laughing with a regular. She set the pot down, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "I don't touch the pause," she said. "I'm in the supplemental staff group. Only certain people get access to process tips. The rest of us, we just hope we're included." Her words were matter-of-fact, but the resignation in them cut deeper than any complaint. James leaned back, his face neutral but his mind racing. "Supplemental staff?" he repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Sounds like a fancy way of saying you do the heavy lifting." Emma's lips twitched, a ghost of a smile, but it didn't last. She glanced at her apron, her fingers brushing the notebooks. "Edge. You get used to it," she said, but her tone suggested otherwise. Before he could press further, she moved to the next table, her tray already loaded with fresh orders. James's gaze followed her, then shifted to Ethan, who was now scrolling. Through the pause settings, his brow furrowed in concentration. The screen flickered briefly, displaying something that looked like a user access menu, but Ethan tapped it away before James could read more. Michael, still at the counter, turned just in time to catch Ethan's eye, a subtle nod passing between them. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but to James, it was a flare in the dark. He needed evidence, not just suspicion. As Emma passed by again, clearing plates from a nearby table, James took a chance. "That notebook in your pocket," he said softly. "Looks like it's seen some action. You keeping score out there?" Emma froze, her hands tightening around the stack of plates. For a moment, he thought she'd brush it off, but something in his tone, steady, unjudging, seemed to shift her guard. She glanced toward the counter, ensuring Michael and Ethan were distracted, then pulled the notebook from her apron. It was small, soft-covered, its pages worn and slightly curled. She opened it to a page filled with neat handwriting, columns of numbers, dates, table counts, bill totals, and red-inked notes marking discrepancies. "I don't know why I started," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe I thought someone would care someday. This is every shift, every table I served, every tip I should have gotten. Last 6 weeks, I'm short over $800. James's." Breath caught. He took the notebook, his fingers careful, as if it were a fragile artifact. The pages were a ledger of injustice, each entry a silent protest against a system that had failed her. One line, circled in red, read, "Table 7, $120 bill. $20 tip shown on POS, $0 received." Another, "Table 3, $85 bill, $15 tip, $2 received." The math was meticulous, the truth undeniable. He met her eyes, seeing not anger but exhaustion, the kind that came from fighting a battle no one else acknowledged. "Why keep this?" he asked, handing the notebook back. "Must be risky." Emma tucked it away, her jaw tightening. "Because if I don't, it's like admitting it's okay. And it's not." She hesitated, then added, "I've got a daughter, 6 years old. I'm working doubles to pay off student loans from a teaching degree I never got to use. Every dollar matters." The words landed like a punch. James nodded, his face still the weathered mask of Tom Bennett, but inside, he was reeling. Emma wasn't just a server. She was a mother, a dreamer, a woman who'd been pushed to the margins of a system he designed to lift people up. Her notebook wasn't just evidence. It was a testament to her refusal to be erased. Before he could respond, a shadow fell over the table. Ethan stood there, his smile too bright, his eyes too sharp. "Everything okay over here, Emma?" he asked, his tone light but laced with something else, warning, maybe. "You're falling behind on table 9. Emma straightened, her expression neutral. "Just refilling coffee," she said, grabbing her tray and moving off. Ethan lingered. For a moment, his gaze flicking to James, who raised his cup in a casual salute. "Good coffee," James said, his voice steady. Ethan nodded, but his smile didn't reach his eyes as he returned to the pause. James's pulse quickened. Ethan had overheard something, maybe not the notebook, but enough to make him suspicious. He glanced at Michael, who was now watching Emma, with a scrutiny that hadn't been there before. The air in the diner felt tighter, the amber glow less comforting. James pulled out his phone, shielding it with the toast box, and typed a quick message to Sarah Mitchell, his head of internal investigations. "Check PAWS access logs for branch 28. Look for supplemental staff restrictions." Something's off. He set the phone down, his mind turning over Emma's notebook, Ethan's proprietary taps on the pause, Michael's perfectly timed smile. The system he built was transparent in theory, but theory didn't account for human greed. Emma's $800 loss wasn't an accident. It was a design flaw, one someone had exploited. And James was going to find out who did as Emma passed by again, her tray loaded with orange juice and bagels. James caught her eye. "Keep that notebook safe," he said softly. "It's more important than you think." She nodded, a flicker of trust in her gaze, then moved on, her steps steady despite the weight she carried. James leaned back, the coffee cup cold in his hands. The diner's hum continued, but beneath it, A storm was brewing. He wasn't just Tom Bennett anymore. He was James Carter, and he was ready to tear down the veil hiding the truth. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a pale light over Sunrise Diner No. 28, but the clarity outside did little to ease the knot in James Carter's chest. 3 days had passed since Emma Thompson's notebook had laid bare the theft of her tips, its pages a silent indictment of a system James had once believed unbreakable. The diner's amber glow still beckoned, but to James, it was no longer a beacon of warmth. It was a stage, and the players were hiding their scripts. As Tom Bennett, retired trucker, he slipped back into the corner table, his cap low, his senses sharp. But as James Carter, CEO of Sunrise Restaurant Group, he was waging a silent war to reclaim the fairness he'd promised. 20 years ago, the diner hummed with its usual rhythm. The clink of mugs, the sizzle of bacon on the grill, the low chatter of regulars. The old man in plaid was at the counter, his coffee untouched, his eyes on a crossword puzzle. A young couple in a booth shared a plate of pancakes, their laughter a stark contrast to the tension James felt coiling around him. He ordered his usual black coffee toast, the convenience store box as a prop, but his attention was on the floor, where Emma moved like a shadow, serving 12 tables with a grace that masked her exhaustion. Her notebook, he knew, was still tucked in her apron, a fragile shield against a system rigged to ignore her. James's phone buzzed softly. A message from Sarah Mitchell, head of internal investigations. Pause logs accessed. Supplemental staff group exists. Restricts tip processing for 60% of employees at Branch 28. Digging deeper. Sarah's efficiency was legendary. 3 regional embezzlement cases cracked in 4 years, but even she sounded cautious. The supplemental staff label wasn't a glitch. It was a deliberate gate, locking workers like Emma out of their earnings. James pocketed the phone, his jaw tightening. He needed more than logs. He needed to see the machine in action. Ethan Harris stood by the pause system, his gelled hair catching the light as he tapped the screen with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Michael Harris, the branch manager, was at the counter, his dark blue shirt crisp, his smile a polished mask as he chatted with a regular. But James noticed Michael's eyes darting toward Emma, a scrutiny that hadn't been there before Ethan's interruption 3 days ago. The air felt charged, as if the diner itself were holding its breath. James sipped his coffee, its bitterness a reminder of the stakes. He'd returned each morning since seeing Emma's notebook, varying his arrival to avoid suspicion. Yesterday, he'd caught Ethan accessing a menu labeled User Settings, his fingers moving too quickly for a part-time server. Today, James positioned himself closer to the counter, his table offering a partial view of the pause screen. When Ethan stepped away to grab a tray, James leaned forward, squinting. The screen flickered, displaying a list of user roles. Pause supervisor, preferred access, supplemental staff. Ethan returned before James could read more, but the term preferred access burned in his mind. That wasn't in the Sunrise manual. A new face caught his attention. Sophie Clark, a young server with nervous energy, her apron still stiff from being new. She fumbled with an order at table 6, her pencil trembling as she scribbled. Ethan, passing by, ignored her plea for help. With the pause, brushing her off with a smirk. "Figure it out, rookie," he said, returning to the counter. Sophie's face flushed, but she pressed on, her hands shaking as she entered the order manually. James felt a pang of recognition. Sophie was Emma 10 years ago, full of potential but already dimmed by a system that didn't care. Another voice broke his thoughts. Lucas Wright, a wiry man in his late 50s, approached James's table with a coffee pot. His name tag read server 15 years, and his eyes carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many shifts. "Top you off, Tom?" Lucas asked, his voice gruff but kind. James nodded, seizing the chance to probe. "Place seems busy," he said. "Tips must be good with all these tables." Lucas snorted, pouring the coffee. "Used to be. Ever since Michael took over, the system's different. Some folks get more than others, and it ain't based on work." He glanced at Emma, who was balancing a tray of juice and bagels. "She's the best we got, but the machine don't see her." Lucas moved off, leaving James with a new piece of the puzzle. The veterans knew, but like Emma, they'd learned to stay silent. James's phone buzzed again. A call from Robert Klein, a board member with a knack for timing. He stepped outside, the cold air biting as he answered. "James, you're spending too much time on one diner," Robert said, his tone clipped. "Branch 28's numbers are fine 8% above target. Focus on the new openings. We can't afford distractions." James gripped the phone, his voice steady but firm. "Numbers don't tell the whole story, Robert. Something's wrong here, and I'm handling it." Robert sighed, a warning in his pause. "Don't rock the boat, James. Not now." The call ended, leaving James staring at the diner's sign, its neon flicker a reminder of the dream he built and the risk of losing it. Inside, the tension had thickened. Emma was called to the back office by Michael, her tray abandoned. On the counter, James's pulse quickened. He moved to a table closer to the office, pretending to read a menu. Through the glass partition, he saw Michael leaning over his desk, his voice low but sharp. "Your performance needs work, Emma," he said, his smile gone. "Focus on your tables, not other distractions." Emma's face was unreadable, but her hands clenched at her sides. "I'm doing my job, Michael," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor James imagined beneath it. Michael waved her out, his eyes cold. When Emma returned to the floor, her notebook was still in her apron, but her steps were heavier, her smile tighter. James caught her eye, offering a nod, but she looked away, as if afraid to draw more attention. He scribbled a note on a napkin. "Don't stop writing. You're not alone." He folded it and slipped it under his plate when she cleared his table, her fingers brushing the napkin without a word. Back at the counter, Ethan was on the pause again, his fingers tapping rapidly. James angled his phone, snapping a blurry photo of the screen before Ethan noticed. The image was grainy, but readable. "Preferred access. Michael H., Ethan H., kitchen support." The last entry was a ghost no kitchen staff used the pause. James's blood ran cold. This wasn't a mistake. It was a heist, orchestrated from within. He texted Sarah, "Photo incoming. Check for preferred access," and a dummy account labeled kitchen support. Sarah's reply was instant. "On it. Stay low, this is bigger than we thought." James pocketed the phone, his mind racing. The notebook, the restricted access, Lucas's quiet resentment, Sophie's struggle, each was a crack in the facade of Sunrise Diner. No, 28. But cracks could bring down a building if you knew where. To push Dot, as he left, James glanced back at Emma, who was serving a new table, her notebook barely visible in her apron. Michael watched her from the counter, his smile back in place, but his eyes were those of a man guarding a secret. Ethan tapped to pause, oblivious to the storm brewing. James stepped into the sunlight, the diner's glow fading behind him. He wasn't just gathering evidence anymore. He was mapping a battlefield, and the next move would decide who stood and who fell. The clock above the counter of Sunrise Diner, no, 28 read 9:02 a.m., and the morning rush was in full swing. The air buzzed with the clatter of plates, the hiss of the espresso machine, and the chatter of customers, truckers, locals, and a few stragglers seeking refuge from the chill outside. But for James Carter, the diner was no longer a bustling eatery. It was a courtroom, and the verdict was about to be delivered. Gone was the disguise of Tom Bennett, the retired trucker. Today, James stood in the parking lot, straightening the lapels of his charcoal suit, his old pocket watch, a gift from his father, ticking heavily in his pocket. Behind him, Sarah Mitchell, head of internal investigations, clutched a tablet, her face a mask of quiet determination. They had evidence, hard and undeniable, and the time for shadows was over. James's phone vibrated one last time before he silenced it. A final report from Sarah. Over the past 2 months, 65% of digital tips at Branch 28, totaling $6,200, had been funneled to a single account under Ethan Harris, listed as POS supervisor despite his part-time status. A shell company, Harris Consulting LLC, owned by Michael Harris, had siphoned off service processing fees weekly, matching the exact amounts of missing cash tips reported in Emma Thompson's notebook. Most damning was the kitchen support account, a ghost profile created by Michael to divert funds, unlinked to any real employee. The numbers were a betrayal, not just of the staff but of the very soul of Sunrise. James took a deep breath, the cold air sharpening his resolve, and pushed open the diner's door. The chime of the doorbell cut through the noise, heads turning briefly before returning to their plates. Emma was on the floor, training a new server, her tray steady despite the chaos of 12 tables. Sophie Clark, the nervous rookie, shadowed her, scribbling notes. Lucas Wright, the veteran, cleared plates with a quiet efficiency. At the counter, Ethan tapped the pause screen, his movements quick and practiced, while Michael chatted with a regular, his smile as polished as ever. But James saw the cracks. Ethan's glance toward Michael, Michael's subtle nod, the way the air seemed to tighten around them. James strode to the counter, Sarah at his side, her tablet glowing with real-time data. The diner's hum faltered as customers sensed the shift, forks pausing mid-bite. Michael's smile froze, his eyes narrowing as he registered James, not Tom, but James Carter, CEO of Sunrise Restaurant Group. Ethan's fingers stopped on the pause, his face paling. Emma, sensing the change, set her tray down, her gaze locking onto James with a mix of confusion and hope. "Good morning," James said, his voice calm but carrying the weight of a gavel. He placed a hand on the counter, his eyes sweeping the room before settling on Michael. "I won't take much of your time, just the 20 years I've spent building this company." The diner fell silent, the only sound the faint drip of coffee from a machine left unattended. "I once said fairness isn't a slogan. It's a behavior, repeated every day. But here, someone rewrote the rules to turn sharing into privilege. And I didn't build Sunrise for that." Sarah tapped her tablet, a graph appearing, employee names, tip percentages, and transfers to Harris Consulting LLC. Red lines highlighted Ethan's account, swallowing 65% of the digital tips. A second tab showed the kitchen support account, its transactions linked to Michael's LLC. James turned to Ethan, his voice steady but cutting. 65% of the tips didn't go to those who served. They went to you because the system was bent by someone with power. Ethan opened his mouth, but no words came. Michael stepped forward, his smile replaced by a forced calm. "James, there's been a misunderstanding. The system's got glitches, technical issues. We've been working to fix it." His voice was smooth, but his hands betrayed him, fidgeting with the pen in his pocket. James shook his head. "Glitches don't create shell companies, Michael. Harris Consulting LLC has been draining tips for months, and kitchen support isn't a person, it's a lie you built." He nodded to Sarah, who displayed a legal document, Michael's name, signed as the LLC's owner. The room's silence deepened, customers exchanging glances, servers frozen in place. Emma stepped forward, her notebook clutched in her hand, its curled edges a stark contrast to the sleek tablet. "I've got proof too," she said, her voice quiet but firm. She opened the notebook, revealing pages of red ink discrepancies, each entry a wound. $800 gone in 6 weeks. That's my daughter's school supplies, her clothes, my rent. Her words weren't loud, but they carried, slicing through Michael's facade. Michael's face reddened, his voice rising. You're out of line, Emma. This is internal, stay out of it. But James raised a hand, silencing him. She's the only one in line here, Michael. Effective immediately. You're suspended. All records go to legal. Ethan, you too. There's no room at Sunrise for those who turn a tip-sharing system into personal gain. A gasp rippled through the diner, followed by a heavy stillness. Ethan dropped his access card on the counter, his hand shaking. Michael's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his eyes darting to the door as if calculating an escape. Then, a single clap broke the silence, a regular, the old man in plaid standing at the counter. Another followed, then another, until a scattering of applause filled the room, not loud, but enough to shift the air. Sophie's eyes welled up. Lucas nodded slowly, and Emma stood taller, her notebook still open. James turned to the staff, his voice softening but resolute. If you've done the work, you'll be seen, acknowledged, and rewarded. But if you've hidden fairness behind a smile, you'll have to leave. He pointed to the pause screen still glowing with Sarah's data. Starting today, this system answers to you, all of you. No more locked doors, no more invisible roles. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. We're resetting access across the board. Every employee gets defined ID, tied to the tables you serve. No exceptions. She tapped a tablet, the screen shifting to a mock-up of the new system. Names, hours, tips, all transparent. The staff exchanged glances, a flicker of hope breaking through their guarded expressions. Michael and Ethan gathered their things, the weight of their actions settling in. As they walked out, the doorbell's chime felt final, like a curtain falling. James looked at Emma, who met his gaze, her eyes clear for the first time since he'd met her. No words were needed her. Straightened shoulders said enough. The diner slowly came back to life. Customers returning to their meals, servers moving again. James lingered at the counter, his pocket watch heavy in his hand. The confrontation was over, but the real work was just beginning. Fairness wasn't restored in a single morning. It would take rebuilding, trust, and time. But for now, the truth had been called by its name. And Sunrise Diner, no. 28 felt a little closer to the dream he'd once sketched on a napkin. The morning after the confrontation at Sunrise Diner, no 28, the air inside felt different, not lighter, not yet, but charged with possibility. The amber lights still glowed, the coffee pots still hissed, and the regulars still claimed their usual spots, but a quiet shift had taken root. The pause screen, once a gatekeeper of privilege, now displayed a new interface. Names of servers, hours worked, tips earned, all in real time, transparent as glass. James Carter stood at the back of the diner, no longer disguised as Tom Bennett. His charcoal suit replaced by a simple sweater, his pocket watch ticking softly in his pocket. He watched Emma Thompson move across the floor, not with a tray but with a clipboard, training Sophie Clark on the new system. The battle had been won, but the war for fairness was just beginning. James had spent the night with Sarah Mitchell, head of internal investigations, finalizing the new POS framework. Every employee now had a personalized ID linked to the tables. They served with tip distribution logged and encrypted by actual hours worked. Cross-shift auditing ensured no one could tamper with the data, and a digital dashboard displayed real-time tip shares, green bars rising for each server's contribution. It was a system designed to see the invisible people like Emma, who'd carried the diner on her shoulders while the old rules buried her. But James knew systems alone didn't change hearts. That would take time, trust, and people willing to fight for it. Emma was that person. A week after Michael and Ethan Harris were suspended, James offered her a new role, regional training manager. She hesitated, her eyes flickering with doubt. "I'm just a server," she'd said, her fingers brushing the worn notebook still tucked in her apron. "I don't know how to lead." James had smiled, handing her a new ID card with her name and title. "You've been leading this whole time, Emma. You just didn't have a title." Now, she stood at the center of Branch 28, explaining the pause system to Sophie and Lucas Wright, her voice steady, her frayed uniform replaced by a crisp one. Though she still wore her old name tag, a quiet nod to her roots thought the transition wasn't seamless. At Branch 28, some staff embraced the change. Sophie's nervous energy had softened into cautious confidence, her fingers now steady on the pause as she logged her first tip share. Lucas, the veteran who'd nearly retired, stayed on, his gruff demeanor hiding a renewed pride. "Never thought I'd see my name on that screen," he told James one morning, his voice low but warm. But others were skeptical, whispering about more work for the same pay, or eyeing Emma with envy, as if her rise threatened their own. James overheard one server mutter, "She's just the boss's pet now," and it stung, reminding him that fairness was a habit, not a switch. Beyond Branch 28, the reform faced resistance. James received reports from other locations, managers at branches 12 and 47 complained that the new system reduced flexibility, a thinly veiled defense of their own control over tips. At a board meeting, Robert Klein, the skeptical board member, leaned forward, his voice sharp. "This overhaul's expensive, James. New software, training, audits. Branch 28's drama doesn't justify disrupting the whole chain." James held his gaze, his pocket watch heavy in his hand. "We're not just fixing one diner, Robert. We're fixing a promise. If we lose that, we lose everything." The room fell silent, but Robert's frown lingered, a reminder that not everyone saw fairness as a priority. Emma faced her own challenges. At Branch 42, her first stop as regional trainer, she walked into a diner buzzing with distrust. The manager, a wiry man named Greg, greeted her with a smirk. "So, you're the tip crusader?" he said, arms crossed. Emma didn't flinch. She opened her notebook, not to show evidence, but to share her story. The $800 she'd lost, the daughter she was fighting for, the system that had erased her. The staff listened, their skepticism softening as she demonstrated the new pause, showing how their names would appear. Their work counted. By the end of the day, a server named Maria approached her, eyes wet. "I thought no one cared," she said. "Thank you for proving me wrong, but not every battle was won." At Branch 17, Sarah's team uncovered a manager attempting to bypass the new system, redirecting tips to a personal account. Emma, alerted by a server's tip-off, reported it to Sarah, who activated the audit protocols. The manager was suspended, but the incident shook Emma. She sat in her car that night, her daughter's drawing of a smiling sun taped to the dashboard, and wondered if she was strong enough to keep going. The notebook, still in her bag, felt heavier now, not with evidence, but with responsibility. She texted James, "It's harder than I thought, but I won't stop." His reply was simple, "You never have." Back at Branch 28, the diner was finding its rhythm. Sophie, now confident, laughed with a customer as she processed a tip, her name glowing on the dashboard. Lucas mentored a new hire, showing him how to check his ID access. The regulars noticed the change, too. The old man in plaid left a bigger tip, nodding at Emma as if he knew her story. But James saw the bigger picture. Turnover at Branch 28 had dropped 15% in 2 weeks, and the engagement score was climbing. The green bars on the pause weren't just numbers. They were proof that fairness could be rebuilt, one shift at a time. Still, James knew the reform was fragile. He stood at the counter one morning, watching Emma train a new group. Her voice was Firm but kind, her notebook now a prop to show how far they'd come. "This system doesn't hide you," she told them. "It sees you. Make sure you see yourselves too." Sophie, standing nearby, placed a hand on Emma's arm, a small gesture of solidarity. Lucas, wiping down a table, caught James's eye and nodded, a silent acknowledgement that the diner was theirs again. James slipped his pocket watch from his pocket, its ticking a reminder of the promise he'd made to his father, a place where work mattered more than connections. He wasn't done, not yet. There were 61 other diners, each with its own shadows to chase. But for now, Branch 28 was a start, a beacon of what sunrise could be. As he stepped toward the door, Emma called, "Out, coffee for the road, sir." Her smile was real now, no longer strained. James shook his head, smiling back. "I'm good, Emma. Keep the place running." Outside, the sun was high, the neon sign steady for the first time in weeks. The diner wasn't perfect, but it was honest again. And that, James knew, was the foundation for everything else. A month had passed since the confrontation at Sunrise Diner No. 28, and the early morning carried a new rhythm. The amber lights still glowed, the coffee pots still steamed, but the air was lighter, infused with the soft clink of spoons and the murmur of customers who sensed the change without knowing its name. The neon sign outside shone steady, its cursive sunrise no longer flickering. Inside, the POS screen hummed quietly, its dashboard displaying tip shares in real time. Table 9, $3.20 tip, Sophie C. Table 3, $5.75 tip, Lucas W. Table 12, $4.50 tip, Mia R. No more whispers about missing shares, no more hidden rolls. The system saw everyone, and the diner felt alive again. James Carter sat at his old corner table, the vinyl seat familiar under him. He wore no disguise today, just a worn sweater and jeans, his pocket watch resting on the table beside a cup of black coffee and a half-eaten slice of toast. He hadn't announced his return, hadn't needed to. His eyes followed Emma Thompson, who stood near the counter, instructing a group of new hires on their POS access. Her voice was calm but firm, her frayed name tag still pinned to her uniform, a quiet reminder of the road she'd traveled. She didn't notice James, her focus on the trainees, and he preferred it that way. This wasn't his moment. It was hers. Emma had become more than a regional training manager. She was a quiet force, carrying the transparent tip-sharing model to every Sunrise location, still clinging to old ways. Her notebook, once a ledger of injustice, now sat in her bag, its pages filled but no longer needed. At Branch 42, she'd left it on the manager's desk with a note, "For the next person, in case you need proof you're not crazy for noticing unfairness." She didn't preach or demand. She shared her story, $800 lost, a daughter's future at stake, a system that had erased her and let the truth do the rest. Servers at Branch 17, inspired by her, had returned after nearly quitting, one writing to her, "I don't need special treatment. I just need a system that doesn't leave me out." At Branch 53, a young server named Lena sent a message. Seeing my name on the tip board made me cry. I exist now. Thank you. James sipped his coffee, its warmth grounding him as he watched Sophie Clark laugh with a customer, her once nervous hand steady on the POS. Lucas Wright, the veteran who'd stayed on, mentored a new hire, showing him how to check tip logs. The old man in plaid, a regular, left a $10 tip on a $15 bill, nodding at Sophie as if he knew the diner's secret. The dashboard's green bars rose steadily, a visual promise that work was seen, effort rewarded. Turnover across the chain had dropped 20%, and a new metric, feeling seen, had been added to internal reviews, measured not in dollars, but in the tired glances that now held a spark of hope. But the journey wasn't over. Some branches resisted, their managers grumbling about overreach. Robert Klein, the board member, still pushed for cost cuts, arguing that sentiment doesn't pay bills. James countered with data. Engagement scores up 25%, customer retention climbing. Yet he knew the real fight was cultural, not numerical. Fairness wasn't a switch flipped in a single morning. It was a path walked daily, with people like Emma leading the way. As Emma finished her training, she cleared James's table, pausing when she found a folded $20 bill under his plate. Tucked beneath was a handwritten note. "Thank you for not giving up, even when no one stood beside you. Today, you're not alone, and no one else will be." She read it silently, her fingers tracing the words, then slipped it into her notebook without a word. She didn't need to keep it. Every line was etched in her memory, forged in the night she'd cleaned tables alone, asking herself if she should keep going. This morning, she had her answer. James stood to leave, his coffee untouched, a second message left in its stillness. As he reached the door, Emma glanced up, their eyes meeting briefly. No words passed, but her calm, clear gaze was enough. Outside, the sun broke through, slanting across the sunrise sign. The diner bore the same name, but it was redefined. No more nameless servers, no more shadows cast by favoritism. One rule remained. Those who worked were seen, the real ones. Rewarded. Emma returned to the counter, her notebook now a relic, its pages a memory of a system revived. She looked at the dashboard, her name absent. She no longer waited tables, but others' names glowed, proof that fairness was taking root. She thought of her daughter, asleep at home, a drawing of a smiling sun on the fridge. For her, Emma would keep walking this path, not just for sunrise, but for every Lena, every Maria, every server who cried seeing their name in green. This story isn't just about a diner or a broken tip system. It's about the quiet courage of people like Emma, who refuse to be erased, and leaders like James, who dare to listen when the truth whispers. At its core, it's a testament to the human need to be seen, to have one's work matter. Emma's notebook wasn't just evidence. It was her voice, preserved when no one else would hear. James's journey, from a disguised observer to a reformer, reminds us that power is meaningless without accountability. The diner's transformation shows that fairness isn't a gift handed down, it's a fight, won through persistence, evidence, and the will to act. The lessons are clear. Injustice thrives in silence, but it crumbles under scrutiny. Emma's story teaches us to document, to speak, even when the odds seem stacked. James's resolve urges leaders to step into the trenches, to see their systems through the eyes of those they serve. And the diner's rebirth proves that change, though hard, is possible when trust is rebuilt, one transparent act at a time. In a world where workers often feel invisible, this story is a call to notice, to act, to ensure no one's labor is stolen by a rigged game. If stories like this resonate with you, tales of courage, justice, and the human spirit, subscribe to the Legacy Stories channel. Every week, we bring you narratives that inspire, challenge, and remind us what it means to stand for something. Join our community, share your thoughts, and let's keep these stories alive. Hit that subscribe button and don't miss the next chapter of hope and humanity.